Grace Hartley had it all: a successful career, a wealthy husband, a baby on the way. Then, in front of 200 witnesses, her husband pushed her off a yacht. She lost everything in those dark waters: her child, her life, her future. But that was just the beginning, because the man who destroyed her, he wasn't working alone. And the person who came to save her, he was the mastermind behind it all. This is the story of a woman who was pushed under and learned to rise. A story of betrayal, conspiracy, and justice against impossible odds. If you love true crime drama and stories of survival, hit that like button and subscribe. You won't believe where this goes. Let's begin. The champagne flowed like liquid gold under the Miami moonlight. Grace Hartley stood on the deck of the luxury yacht, one hand resting protectively on her 7-month pregnant belly, the other gripping the railing. Below, the dark Atlantic waters churned against the hull. Inside the main cabin, 200 guests celebrated her husband's triumph. Marcus Hartley had just taken his tech company public. $500 million. The party was supposed to be their crowning moment. Grace watched through the glass doors as Marcus laughed with investors. His hand rested on the small of Vanessa Cole's back. The gesture lasted 3 seconds too long. Grace had been counting lately. Counting the late nights. Counting the texts that made him smile in ways she no longer could. Counting the Lees. Vanessa wore red. Of course she did. The chief operating officer of Marcus's company moved through the crowd like she owned it. Maybe she did. Grace had built the life. Vanessa had simply walked in and taken it. Mrs. Hartley, a server, appeared with a tray of sparkling water. You look pale. Should I call the ship's doctor? Grace shook her head. I'm fine, just needed air. But she wasn't fine. Her back ached. Her feet had swollen beyond recognition. The baby had been kicking all evening, as if sensing her mother's distress. Grace had begged Marcus to cancel this party. The doctor had warned about stress, but Marcus never listened anymore. Appearances mattered more than his wife, more than his unborn child. The deck door slid open. Marcus stepped out, his jaw tight. Grace knew that look. She had seen it 1,000 times over their 8-year marriage. Anger, barely contained beneath his CEO smile. We need to talk, he said, his voice low. Not here, Marcus. Not tonight. You embarrassed me in there. He moved closer. Grace caught the scent of expensive scotch on his breath. Whispering to Beth Morrison, my own wife, feeding gossip to a journalist. I was catching up with my best friend. That's all. Don't lie to me, Grace. His hand shot out, gripping her arm. I saw you showing her something on your phone. Grace pulled away. You're drunk, and you're paranoid, just like I told Vanessa. There it was. The confirmation Grace had been dreading. You discuss our marriage with her. I discuss everything with her. She understands the pressure I'm under. She doesn't nag me about baby furniture and feelings. Marcus's eyes were cold in the moonlight. She gets it. Grace, she gets me. Then maybe you should have married her. The words hung between them like smoke. Grace saw something shift in Marcus's expression. Not hurt, something darker. Calculation. You know what? Marcus stepped closer. Maybe I should have. Grace's heart pounded. She should walk away, go back inside. But anger kept her feet planted. I found the credit card statements. Marcus, the hotel charges, the jewelry that never came home to me. You're going through my things now. His voice rose. Jesus, Grace, you've become obsessed. I'm your wife, the mother of your child. I have a right to so. You have a right to shut up and smile. Marcus's face was inches from hers now. Do you know how much this IPO matters? How many people are watching? And here you are, playing detective, making me look like an idiot. You're making yourself look like an idiot. Everyone at this party knows about Vanessa. Everyone at this party knows you're a paranoid mess. Marcus grabbed both her arms. You're ruining everything. Everything I've built. Let go of me. You want to know the truth. Grace, his grip tightened. Fine, yes. Vanessa and I are together, and she's 10 times the woman you've ever been. She's ambitious. She's driven. She's not constantly whining about her feelings and her body and her... Grace slapped him. The sound cracked across the deck like a gunshot. For a moment, Marcus stood frozen. Then his face twisted with rage. You stupid bitch. He shoved her. Hard. Grace stumbled backward. Her hip hit the railing. The world tilted. She saw Marcus's eyes widen as she tipped over the edge. Not regret, surprise. Then she was falling. The water hit like concrete. Pain exploded across her stomach where she'd struck the railing. Salt water filled her mouth, her nose. Grace thrashed, her dress tangling around her legs like seaweed. The yacht's lights blurred above. Voices screamed. Or maybe that was her. Something was wrong. The baby. God, the baby. Grace felt warmth spreading through the cold water. Blood. Her blood. The last thing she saw before the darkness took her was Marcus's face at the railing. Vanessa appeared beside him, her red dress like a wound against the night sky. Then nothing. Grace woke to fluorescent lights and the steady beep of machines. Her mouth tasted like copper and salt. Every part of her body screamed with pain, but it was the emptiness that terrified her most. Her hand moved to her stomach. Flat, bandaged, empty. No! The word came out as a whisper. No, no, no. A nurse appeared, her face professionally sympathetic. Mrs. Hartley, you're awake. Let me get the doctor. My baby. Grace tried to sit up. Pain lanced through her abdomen. Where's my baby? The nurse's expression told her everything. Grace's world collapsed into a single, endless scream. The doctor arrived minutes later. His words filtered through Grace's anguish like water through cloth. Placental abruption, severe internal bleeding, emergency surgery. They had tried, but at 7 months, with the trauma from the fall, the baby boy hadn't survived. A boy. Grace had been carrying a son. He had been supposed to arrive in 2 months. They had picked a name, Oliver Thomas, after her father. Now he was gone. Where's my husband? Grace heard herself ask. The doctor exchanged a glance with the nurse. Mr. Hartley is dealing with the media. This incident has attracted quite a bit of attention. Attention. Their son was dead, and Marcus was worried about attention. I want to see him. Mrs. Hartley, you need to rest. The police will want to speak with you as well. There were witnesses to what happened on the yacht. Police, the word cut through Grace's grief. Because what happened on the yacht wasn't an accident. Marcus had pushed her. In front of 200 people. He had shoved his pregnant wife overboard. Her parents arrived first. Claire Brennan collapsed at Grace's bedside, sobbing. Thomas stood behind his wife, his weathered face carved from stone. He was a retired construction foreman, a man who fixed things with his hands. But he couldn't fix this. Dad, Grace whispered. He killed my baby. Thomas's jaw clenched. I know, sweetheart. We all know. Beth Morrison burst in next, her journalist instincts barely contained behind red-rimmed eyes. Grace, oh my God. Grace. They held each other. No words could fill this void. It was Beth who showed her the phone first. You need to see what he's saying, what they're both saying. Marcus's statement had dropped an hour ago. Carefully crafted, devastatingly effective. Last night, my wife suffered a tragic accident. Grace has been under tremendous stress with the pregnancy and my company's growth. She struggled with anxiety, and I fear the pressure became too much. I'm heartbroken over the loss of our child and focused solely on supporting my wife's recovery. The subtext was clear. Marcus was painting Grace as unstable, erratic, the woman who had fallen from a yacht because she couldn't handle her emotions, and Vanessa. Vanessa had posted a photo of herself looking somber, hands clasped in prayer. My heart breaks for Marcus during this impossibly difficult time, praying for healing and truth. Truth, as if Vanessa knew anything about truth. He's lying, Grace said. Her voice sounded distant, hollow. He pushed me. I didn't fall. We know. Beth pulled up her laptop. Grace, there were people filming, influencers. They always film everything. Several of them captured what happened. Hope flickered in Grace's chest. They have video. They had videos past tense. The hope died. Beth explained quickly. Every influencer who had posted footage of the incident had taken it down within hours. Some claimed technical glitches. Others said they'd reconsidered out of respect for the family. But the truth was simpler and uglier. They had been paid, bought off, silenced. How? Grace whispered. Brett Donovan. Beth's expression hardened. Marcus's business partner. He's got connections everywhere. Former FBI tech division. If anyone could scrub digital evidence, it's him. A knock interrupted them. A man in a rumpled suit entered, badge already out. Detective Ray Fuller, mid-40s, with the tired eyes of someone who had seen too much. Mrs. Hartley, I'm sorry for your loss. He pulled up a chair. I need to ask you some questions about last night. Grace told him everything. The argument, Marcus's confession about Vanessa, the shove, the fall, the blood in the water. Detective Fuller took notes. His expression never changed. When she finished, he closed his notebook. Mrs. Hartley, I believe you, but believing you and proving it are different things. Without video evidence, without witnesses willing to testify, this case becomes your word against his. What about the 200 people at that party? 63 people were on deck or had a view. We've interviewed 17 so far. Not one will say they saw Mr. Hartley push you. They describe an argument, then you stumbling. Several mentioned you seemed intoxicated. I'm 7 months pregnant, I wasn't drinking. I know, but that's what they're saying. Fuller leaned forward. Mrs. Hartley, your husband is a powerful man. Rich, connected, and as of yesterday, significantly richer. People like that don't go down easy. Grace felt the walls closing in. Marcus had done this. He had orchestrated everything. The narrative, the witnesses, the evidence. He had pushed her into the ocean and somehow made the world believe she had fallen. And their son, their beautiful son, was collateral damage. 2 weeks later, Grace moved back into her parents' house. The modest ranch home in Coral Gables felt impossibly small after the waterfront mansion she'd shared with Marcus. But it was safe. Here, surrounded by her mother's garden and her father's quiet strength, Grace could breathe. She couldn't sleep, though every time she closed her eyes, she was falling. Every time she touched her flat stomach, grief threatened to drown her. Beth visited daily, her laptop always open, her reporter's mind always working. I'm not letting this go, she said on day 16. Marcus thinks he won, but he made mistakes. What mistakes? Grace asked. She sat in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by faded posters and memories of simpler times. He erased the evidence. He bought off the witnesses. He's bulletproof. No one's bulletproof. Beth pulled up a folder on her screen. I've been digging into Brett Donovan. And guess what? He left a trail. Payments to the influencers. They tried to hide it, but money always leaves traces. Wire transfers, NDAs, legal fees. It's all there if you know where to look. Grace leaned forward. For the first time since the hospital, something other than grief stirred in her chest. Anger. Purpose. Can we prove Marcus ordered it? Not yet. Brett was careful to keep Marcus's name off everything. But Brett doesn't do anything without Marcus's approval. They're partners. Have been for 12 years. If Brett paid off witnesses, Marcus knew about it. Grace's phone buzzed. Her lawyer, Elena Martinez. Grace had hired her immediately after leaving the hospital. Elena was young, hungry, and didn't scare easily. She was also one of the few Latina attorneys who'd made partner at a major Miami firm before going solo. The text read, Detective Fuller arrested Marcus an hour ago. Attempted assault charge. Get here now. Grace's heart leaped. She looked at Beth. They arrested him. They made it to the courthouse in 20 minutes. Media vans already clogged the street. Apparently, a tech CEO being arrested for pushing his pregnant wife off a yacht was national news. Who knew inside? Elena waited with Detective Fuller. The district attorney reviewed my findings, Fuller explained. We found enough inconsistencies in the witness statements to move forward. Plus, we recovered audio from the yacht's bridge. It's not perfect, but you can hear raised voices. Mr. Hartley saying you're ruining everything. Grace felt tears prick her eyes. He's actually going to face charges. He'll make bail, Elena warned. Men like Marcus always do. But yes, he's being charged. This is real. Grace. The arraignment took less than an hour. Marcus appeared in an expensive suit, his lawyer by his side. He didn't look at Grace. Not once. Vanessa sat in the back row, perfectly styled, perfectly supportive. The judge set bail at $2 million. Marcus's lawyer wrote the check before they left the courtroom. But something had shifted. The narrative was changing. Beth's network picked up her story. Tech CEO arrested in yacht incident that killed unborn child. Other outlets followed. Social media exploded with hashtag Justice for Grace. Marcus's company stock dropped 30% in a day. Grace stood outside the courthouse, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. She hadn't prepared a statement, but the words came anyway. My husband pushed me off a yacht. He killed our son, and for 2 weeks he's lied to everyone. He's tried to make me look crazy, unstable, paranoid. But I'm not crazy. I'm not unstable. I'm a woman whose child was murdered, and I will not be silent anymore. The footage went viral within an hour. That evening, Grace sat with her parents and Beth, watching the news coverage. For the first time since the hospital, Grace smiled, small, fragile, but real. We're winning, she said. Thomas squeezed her shoulder. That's my girl. But winning, Grace would learn, was always temporary, and Marcus was just getting started. Grace spent the next 48 hours preparing for trial. Elena had assembled a solid case. The yacht's audio recording, medical reports documenting Grace's injuries, character witnesses who would testify to Marcus's controlling behavior, financial records showing he'd been moving assets before the incident, suggesting premeditation. They had enough. Not perfect, but enough. Grace even started looking at apartments, small ones she could afford on her own. She was an architect. Damn it, she had built a successful firm before Marcus had convinced her to slow down for the pregnancy. She could rebuild, start over. Oliver's memory deserved a mother who fought back, not one who gave up. On the morning of day 49, Detective Fuller called. Mrs. Hartley, we need to talk. In person. His tone sent ice through Grace's veins. He arrived at her parents' house 20 minutes later. Elena came too, her usual confidence replaced by something harder. Worry. The videos, Fuller said without preamble. We recovered fragments from 3 devices. Influencers who uploaded to cloud services before deleting local copies. We had enough to reconstruct what happened on that deck. That's good. Right, Grace asked. Had. Fuller's expression was grim. Past tense, as of 6 hours ago. Those files are gone. Not deleted, erased, completely unrecoverable. Grace felt the room tilt. How is that possible? Someone with serious technical expertise accessed our evidence servers. The breach was sophisticated, military grade. We're investigating, but he didn't finish. He didn't have to. Brett Donovan, former FBI Tech Division. There's more, Elena said quietly. The influencers we subpoenaed, every single one has recanted their previous statements. They now claim they didn't actually see the push. They heard arguing, saw you fall, but the angle was wrong, the lighting was bad. They can't testify definitively to what happened. He paid them. Grace's voice was flat. How much? 50,000 each, plus NDAs, plus legal protection if they face perjury charges for their initial statements. Grace did the math. 17 witnesses, $850,000. For Marcus, pocket change. For justice, the death blow. Without the videos, Elena continued, and without witnesses willing to testify to the actual push. We're back to, he said. She said, the audio from the yacht is helpful, but it only proves an argument, not assault. The charges will be dismissed, Fuller said. What he didn't say, but what everyone in the room understood, was that Marcus would walk free, not just free, victorious. The powerful man who had been falsely accused by his unstable wife, Grace felt something break inside her. Not loudly, quietly, like a crack in glass that starts small and spreads. There has to be something, she whispered. Some evidence he can't erase. Elena and Fuller exchanged glances. We're still looking, Elena said, but her tone said what her words didn't. It was over. That night, Grace lay in her childhood bed, staring at the ceiling. Beth had left hours ago, promising to keep digging. Her parents had gone to sleep. The house was silent. Grace pulled up her phone. The messages from well-wishers had slowed. The hashtag Justice for Grace had been replaced by hashtag Mental Health Matters. implying she was the one who needed help. Marcus's PR team was brilliant. She scrolled to Marcus's Instagram. He'd posted an hour ago, a photo of himself looking haggard but noble. The caption read, "The truth is finally emerging. I hope my wife gets the help she needs. I'm focusing on healing and honoring our son's memory." Comments flooded with support. "Stay strong, Marcus. She's clearly unstable. You deserve better." Grace closed the app. She thought about Oliver, about the nursery she'd designed but never finished, about the names she'd written in a journal, about the future that had died in dark water. And she thought about Marcus, walking free while her son lay in a cemetery plot too small for words. The world wasn't fair. Justice wasn't guaranteed. Sometimes evil men won simply because they had more money, more power, more connections. Grace turned off her phone. In the darkness, she let herself feel the full weight of her loss. Not just Oliver, not just her marriage, but her faith that truth mattered, that fighting back made a difference. She had believed she was winning. She had been wrong. The preliminary hearing happened on a Tuesday. Grace sat behind Elena, watching Marcus's defense team systematically dismantle the case. Without video evidence, without credible witnesses, the state's case crumbled like sand. But it was what happened after the hearing that destroyed Grace completely. Marcus's lead attorney, a silver-haired shark named Richard Bennett, requested permission to present new evidence. The judge allowed it. "Your Honor," Bennett began, "we have documentation proving Mrs. Hartley's mental instability predates the yacht incident. In fact, Mr. Hartley has been deeply concerned about his wife's deteriorating condition for months. He presented medical records, therapy sessions Grace supposedly attended, prescriptions for anxiety medication, notes from a psychiatrist detailing Grace's paranoid ideation and potential postpartum psychosis." Grace's blood ran cold. "I never saw a psychiatrist," she whispered to Elena. "I know." Elena's jaw was tight. "They're fabricated, but proving that will take time we don't have." The judge reviewed the documents. His expression shifted. Not sympathetic anymore, skeptical. Bennett continued, "We also have testimony from Mrs. Hartley's business partner, Stephen Walsh, regarding her erratic behavior in the months before the incident." Stephen, Grace's throat closed. She'd built their architectural firm with Stephen, her classmate from design school. They'd been friends for 15 years. Stephen took the stand. He wouldn't meet Grace's eyes. "Mr. Walsh," Bennett said, "can you describe Mrs. Hartley's behavior in the 6 months before the yacht incident?" Stephen cleared his throat. Grace was under a lot of stress. The pregnancy was difficult. She missed meetings, made mistakes on projects. Clients complained. He paused. "I was worried about her. She seemed overwhelmed, paranoid about her husband, constantly checking her phone, making accusations. It wasn't like her." Grace wanted to scream. She had been stressed because she was pregnant and running a business while her husband was cheating. She had missed meetings because of morning sickness. The only mistake she'd made was trusting Stephen. But the damage was done. Stephen's testimony, combined with the fake medical records, painted a picture of a woman spiraling out of control. That was tragedy 1, character assassination. Tragedy 2 came that afternoon. Grace met with her accountant, trying to understand her financial situation. What she discovered made her physically ill. Marcus had emptied their joint accounts 6 months ago. Slowly, carefully, moving money into offshore accounts Grace couldn't touch. The house was in his name only. The cars, the investments, the savings, all gone. But it was worse than that. Grace's business accounts had been frozen. Her accountant explained that Marcus was a silent co-signer on the firm's operating account, a detail Grace had forgotten about when they'd first started dating and she needed capital. Marcus had used his co-signer status to freeze everything. Her firm couldn't make payroll, couldn't pay rent, couldn't function. By end of business that day, her partner Stephen sent an email. "Grace, I can't be associated with this scandal anymore. I'm buying you out. Here's my offer." The number was insultingly low, but Grace had no leverage. Stephen knew it. Her company, the firm she'd built from nothing, was gone, stolen by her husband and her former friend. Tragedy 3 arrived that night. Grace's father collapsed in the kitchen. Heart attack. The stress of watching his daughter's life destroyed had literally broken his heart. Claire called 911 while Grace performed CPR, her hands shaking, her voice begging her father to stay. "Don't leave me, Dad. Please don't leave me." The ambulance arrived. They stabilized Thomas at the hospital. He would survive, the doctor said, but he needed surgery, triple bypass. Recovery would take months. Grace sat in the ICU waiting room at 3 in the morning, her mother asleep on her shoulder, and felt the last pieces of her strength crumble. She had lost her son, her marriage, her reputation, her business, and now, nearly, her father. Beth found her there at dawn. She'd been working through the night, chasing down leads. She took one look at Grace's face and sat beside her without speaking. "I can't do this anymore," Grace whispered. "He's taken everything, and he's going to walk away like none of it happened." "No," Beth's voice was fierce. "He's not. We just have to find a different way." But Grace couldn't see any way forward. Only darkness. Only loss. Only the memory of her son's kicks that she would never feel again. She thought about giving up, just stopping the fight, signing whatever Marcus wanted, disappearing into a life so small he could never reach her again. Maybe that would be easier. Maybe that would hurt less. But when morning came and Grace saw her father in his hospital bed, tubes and wires keeping him alive, she remembered something. Brennan's didn't quit. Her father had taught her that, working construction sites in the Florida heat, building things that lasted. He had never given up on anything. She couldn't give up either. Not yet. Not while breath remained in her body. Daniel Cross appeared like a miracle when Grace needed one most. He called her 3 days after Thomas's surgery, his voice smooth and confident. "Mrs. Hartley, my name is Daniel Cross. I was at the yacht party. I saw what happened, and I'd like to help." Grace met him at a coffee shop in Coconut Grove. Daniel was in his late 30s, impeccably dressed, with the easy confidence of old money. He explained that he'd been invited to the IPO celebration by one of Marcus's investors. He'd witnessed the argument on the deck. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Grace asked. Daniel's expression was pained. "Honestly, I was scared. Marcus and Brett Donovan are powerful men. I watched what they did to the influencers who posted videos. I watched them destroy your case piece by piece. I'm ashamed to say I stayed silent out of self-preservation." "Then why come forward now?" "Because I have a daughter. She's 5. And I thought about what kind of man I want her to grow up seeing. Not the kind who stays silent when innocent people suffer." He leaned forward. "Mrs. Hartley, I can't testify to seeing the actual push. My view was blocked. But I heard everything. And more importantly, I can help you fight back in other ways." "What do you mean?" "Then I'm an investor. I have resources. I can fund your legal defense, help you rebuild, get you attorneys who don't back down from men like Marcus Hartley." Grace wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe someone was on her side. But she'd been burned before. "Why would you do this?" "Because it's right." Daniel's eyes were sincere. "And because I've done my research on you. Grace, you're an exceptional architect. You built something from nothing once. You can do it again. But not if Marcus destroys you first." Over the following weeks, Daniel proved his commitment. He hired a team of attorneys that made Elena look like a public defender. He funded a private investigator who started digging into Brett Donovan's digital trail. He helped Grace find a small apartment she could afford, paid for her father's medical bills, even offered her consulting work through his investment firm. For the first time since the yacht, Grace felt like she could breathe. Daniel was kind, intelligent, and genuinely seemed to care about justice. They worked together closely, building a new case against Marcus. And slowly, carefully, something else developed. It wasn't love. Grace's heart was too broken for that. But it was companionship, trust, hope. Daniel never pushed. He was respectful of her grief, her loss. But he was there, steady, reliable. And after months of being alone, Grace found herself leaning on that steadiness. 4 months after they met, Daniel's investigator made a breakthrough. The yacht had a black box system, like an airplane, audio recordings from all decks. The Coast Guard had confiscated it after the incident, but no one had reviewed the full data. Daniel's team got access, and buried in hours of ambient noise, they found it. Crystal clear audio of Marcus's voice. "You're ruining everything. Get out of my way. Grace, Then a scream, a splash, chaos. It was enough. The district attorney refiled charges, attempted assault, reckless endangerment, and now, with undeniable audio evidence, Marcus couldn't make it disappear. Grace cried when she heard the news. Daniel held her while she shook. Relief and grief tangled together. "We're going to win this," he said softly. "Justice is coming." That night, Grace's mother cooked dinner to celebrate. Thomas was home from the hospital, recovering slowly. Beth brought champagne, though Grace stuck to water. The small apartment filled with laughter for the first time. Daniel stayed late, helping clean up. As he prepared to leave, Grace touched his arm. "Thank you for everything. I don't know how I would have survived this without you." "You're stronger than you think," Daniel said. He hesitated, then continued. "Grace, I know the timing is complicated, but I care about you, more than just as someone I'm helping. If you ever want to explore what this could be beyond, well, beyond legal battles and justice, I'd like that." Grace's heart raced. Part of her still belonged to grief, to Oliver, to the life she'd lost. But another part, the part that wanted to live again, to feel something other than pain, responded to Daniel's warmth. "I'd like that too," she whispered. "When this is over, when Marcus is finally behind bars, maybe we could try." Daniel smiled. "I'll wait as long as it takes." He kissed her forehead gently and left. Grace closed the door, leaning against it, feeling something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Real hope. The trial was in 2 days. The audio evidence was irrefutable. Marcus would go to prison. She would get justice for Oliver. Grace allowed herself to imagine a future. A new architectural firm. Her father healthy. Daniel by her side. Not the life she'd planned, but a life worth living. She went to bed that night almost happy. For the first time since the yacht, she slept without nightmares. She didn't know that her hope was built on lies, that the man she was beginning to trust was the architect of her destruction, that in 48 hours, she would lose everything all over again. Grace discovered the truth by accident. Daniel had left his laptop at her apartment after their strategy session. He'd called saying he'd pick it up in the morning, but Grace needed to review some financial documents for her meeting with the prosecutor. She opened the laptop. No password. Daniel had always been casual about security around her, a sign of trust. She'd thought the documents folder was organized meticulously. Grace found the file she needed, clicked it open. The adjacent folder caught her eye. Hartley Strategy. Curious, she opened it. What she found made her blood run cold. Emails, hundreds of them, between Daniel and Marcus, dating back 8 months, before the yacht, before Oliver's death, before everything. The first email she clicked made her stomach drop. "Marcus, the Grace problem needs resolution. She's blocking the merger with Chen Tech. Her moral objections to their labor practices are costing us the deal. We need her out of the picture, preferably in a way that leaves you sympathetic and in control of all marital assets." Marcus's response, agreed. "I'm working on establishing her instability. Vanessa is helping, but we need to be careful. Grace is smarter than she looks. Daniel, leave the details to me. I have experience managing difficult situations. By this time next year, you'll be free, wealthy, and ready to close the Chen Tech acquisition. Grace will be too broken to fight back." Grace's hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the laptop. She kept reading, horror mounting with each email. The yacht party had been Daniel's idea. Public, filmed, perfect for creating a narrative. The push had been planned, though the pregnancy loss was described as unfortunate collateral damage, but potentially beneficial for the sympathy angle. The deleted videos Daniel had coordinated with Brett Donovan. The fake medical records Daniel had hired the forgers. Stephen's betrayal, Daniel had paid him $50,000 to tank Grace's firm and testify against her. And the audio recording, the breakthrough evidence that was supposed to save her, fabricated, edited from hours of ambient sound, spliced together to sound like a confession. "We'll let Grace think she's won," Daniel had written to Marcus 2 weeks ago. "Then at trial, your attorneys will prove the audio is doctored. Forensic analysis will show the edits. Grace will be exposed as desperate enough to manufacture evidence. It will destroy any remaining credibility. The charges will be dismissed with prejudice. You'll countersue for defamation. By the time we're done, she'll have nothing, no money, no reputation, no hope. She'll disappear quietly, and we'll have our merger." Grace read the entire folder. Every email, every strategy, memo, every cold, calculated step in her destruction. Daniel hadn't been her savior. He was Marcus's business partner in a shadow company Grace had never known existed. The Chen-Tech merger was worth $800 million. Grace's moral opposition to their labor practices, her influence over Marcus in the early days of their marriage, had been an obstacle. So they had removed the obstacle permanently. The apartment door opened. Daniel walked in, smiling. "Hey, I figured I'd come grab my laptop tonight after all. I..." He stopped, seeing Grace's face, seeing the laptop open in front of her. His smile didn't fade. It transformed, became something cold and sharp. Well, I was hoping we'd have a few more days." "You monster." Grace's voice shook. "You planned all of this. My son is dead because of you and Marcus." "Your son is dead because Marcus pushed you," Daniel corrected calmly. "I didn't anticipate that, though I'll admit, it worked out well for the narrative." "How could you?" Grace stood, backing away. "You pretended to care. You made me trust you. I thought..." She couldn't finish. The betrayal was too enormous for words. Daniel moved closer. His whole demeanor had changed. The warmth was gone, replaced by cold efficiency. "Grace, you were always the obstacle. Marcus needed a wife for appearances, but you were too principled, too moral. You would have blocked the Chen-Tech deal. You would have exposed their labor violations. You would have cost us hundreds of millions of dollars. So you decided to destroy my life. I decided to remove you from the equation. Efficiently, completely." He gestured to the laptop. "And I have, Doyle. Don't you see? In 2 days. You only walk into court thinking you're about to win. The prosecution will present the audio. Then our forensic expert will prove it's edited. Fake. The judge will hold you in contempt. The charges against Marcus will be dismissed. He'll sue you for defamation, emotional distress, destruction of his reputation. No one will believe him. Everyone will believe him, because you'll have been caught manufacturing evidence. You'll be the crazy, vindictive ex-wife who went so far as to fake proof of a crime. You'll be lucky if you avoid prison yourself." Grace felt the walls closing in. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because it doesn't matter. You have no proof. These emails will be gone before morning. You can scream to anyone who'll listen, but you'll just sound more paranoid, more unstable. Exactly what we've been establishing for months." Daniel picked up his laptop calmly. "It's over. Grace, you lost. And honestly, you were beaten before you even knew there was a fight." He walked to the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I did like you. In another life. Maybe we could have been friends. But business is business. And you were bad business." Then he was gone. Grace stood frozen in her apartment, the truth crashing over her in waves. Everything had been a lie. Every kindness, every moment of hope, every piece of evidence that was supposed to save her. She had been so careful with Marcus. But Daniel had been the real threat all along. The puppet master pulling strings she'd never seen. Grace sank to the floor, her mind racing. The trial was in 2 days. When that audio's evidence was revealed as fake, she would be destroyed, discredited, possibly imprisoned. She had nothing. No evidence, no allies she could trust. No way to prove what Daniel had told her. For the first time since the yacht, Grace understood true despair. Not the grief of loss, but the helplessness of being beaten by people who controlled every piece of the board. She thought about Oliver, about giving up, about walking into the ocean and never coming back. But something in her, some stubborn part that her father had built into her foundation, refused to break. Not yet. Not while one breath remained. If she was going down, she would drag them with her. Somehow. Grace didn't sleep. She sat on her apartment floor all night, staring at nothing, her mind cycling through scenarios. Every path ended in destruction. Daniel had been right. Without proof of the conspiracy, she sounded insane, and the doctored audio would finish her. At dawn, her phone rang. "Beth." Grace, are you okay? I've been trying to reach you all night. I'm fine, Grace lied. Just, I couldn't sleep. I need to see you now. I have something, and I don't want to discuss it over the phone. They met at a diner far from Grace's apartment, far from anywhere Marcus or Daniel might be watching. Beth looked exhausted, her eyes red from lack of sleep. I got fired, Beth said without preamble. Last night, my editor killed my latest story on Marcus and told me if I kept investigating, I'd never work in journalism again. Beth, I'm so sorry. Don't be, because before they locked me out of the system, I downloaded everything, every note, every interview, every financial record I'd found. Beth pulled out a flash drive. And I found something big. She opened her laptop, plugged in the drive. Brett Donovan has been careful, but he's not perfect. I tracked payments from his shell companies to the influencers, to Stephen Walsh, to the forgers who made your fake medical records. But there was one payment I couldn't trace. $500,000 to a consulting firm called Meridian Solutions. I don't understand. Meridian Solutions doesn't exist. It's a front. But the account it paid into, that's real. And it belongs to Daniel Cross. Grace's heart stopped. You can prove Daniel was part of this. Not just part of it. He's the architect. Marcus and Brett are sloppy. They leave trails. But Daniel is careful. Except for this one payment. Brett paid Daniel $500,000 8 months ago, right when your marriage started falling apart. That payment links them directly. Is it enough to take to the police? Beth's expression fell. I don't know. It's circumstantial. A good lawyer could explain it away as a legitimate business transaction. But Grace, it's something. It's proof they're connected. Grace thought frantically. A paper trail linking Daniel to Brett wasn't enough. She needed a confession. Something irrefutable. Something that couldn't be explained away or buried. What if we could get Daniel to admit it? Grace said slowly. Not to me, to someone official. On record. You mean wire you up, Grace? That's dangerous. And probably illegal without police involvement. Then we get the police involved. Detective Fuller. He believed me from the start. Beth bit her lip. It's risky. If Daniel suspects anything, he'll lawyer up. You'll get nothing. And if the wire fails, you've shown your hand. I don't have any other option. In 36 hours, I walk into court and get destroyed. This is my only chance. They called Detective Fuller. He met them at the diner an hour later, listened to everything. The emails Grace had seen, Beth's financial evidence, the plan to get Daniel on record. This is a long shot, Fuller warned. But I've seen longer shots pay off. If Daniel thinks he's won, he might get cocky, might say too much. Will the DA go for it? If you get a confession on tape, absolutely. This turns from he said, she said into conspiracy to commit fraud, witness tampering, obstruction of justice, multiple felonies for Daniel, Marcus, and Brett. Grace felt hope flicker. Fragile, dangerous, but real. How do we do this? Fuller pulled out a small device. You wear a wire. You meet Daniel somewhere public enough that he feels safe but private enough to talk. You get him to confess everything, the emails, the plan, the fake evidence. And if he figures it out, then you walk away. We've got nothing to lose at this point anyway. Grace looked at Beth, at Fuller, at the flash drive holding the only evidence they had. She thought about Oliver, about her father in a hospital bed, about every lie Daniel had told while pretending to care. Let's do it. Fuller made the call to the DA's office while Beth drafted the message Grace would send to Daniel. Something casual, something that wouldn't raise suspicion. Daniel, I need to talk. I'm at the Grove coffee shop. Can you meet me? It's important. They waited 30 minutes. Then Daniel responded. On my way. Fuller fitted Grace with the wire, a tiny device hidden under her shirt. Just keep him talking. Ask questions. Make him explain. Guys like him love to brag about how smart they are. Grace's hands shook as Fuller tested the audio. This was it. Her last chance. Her only chance. You can do this, Beth said, squeezing her hand. Make him pay for Oliver. Grace nodded. For Oliver. For herself. For every woman who'd been destroyed by powerful men who thought they were untouchable. She walked into the coffee shop at noon. Daniel arrived 10 minutes later, smiling, still playing the role of her savior. Grace, is everything okay? You sounded worried. Grace gestured to a quiet table in the corner. Her heart pounded so hard she thought Daniel must hear it. I need to understand something. About the trial. About the audio evidence. Daniel's smile never wavered, but something shifted in his eyes. Calculation. What about it? How did you really find it? The yacht's black box. I've been thinking about it, and some things don't add up. I told you my investigator had connections with the Coast Guard. Right, but the timing, you found it exactly when we needed a breakthrough, when I was at my lowest, when I would have believed anything. Grace leaned forward. It's fake, isn't it? You faked the audio? For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. Then he laughed, soft, almost impressed. When did you figure it out? Does it matter? I suppose not. Daniel leaned back, completely relaxed. Yes, the audio is manufactured. Quite well done, actually. Forensic analysis will reveal the edits, but not until after you present it in court. Then you'll be exposed as a desperate woman who fabricated evidence. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked. And because, as I said at your apartment, it doesn't matter. You can't prove any of it. This conversation isn't being recorded. You have no witnesses. It's your word against mine, and my word is worth considerably more. You destroyed my life for money. I solved a business problem efficiently. Grace, you were in the way of an $800 million merger. Your moral objections to Chen Tech's labor practices would have killed the deal. Marcus needed you gone, and I provided the solution. You helped him kill my son. That was Marcus's improvisation, not my plan. But yes, it worked out well for us. Daniel's expression was completely calm. You were always going to lose. Grace, from the moment you married Marcus, you were playing a game where all the rules were written by people like us. You just didn't know it. Grace forced herself to stay calm, to keep him talking. And the fake medical records, the witnesses, all me, hey, Brett handles the technical aspects, the digital scrubbing, but strategy, that's my specialty. I've been managing difficult situations for 20 years. You're hardly my first obstacle. How many lives have you destroyed? I don't destroy lives, I solve problems. There's a difference. Daniel checked his watch. Was there anything else? I have a meeting in 30 minutes. Grace stood. She'd gotten enough. More than enough. No, I think we're done. I hope you understand. Grace, this isn't personal. You seem like a decent person. You just backed the wrong horse. Next time, choose your battles more carefully. Grace walked out of the coffee shop on shaking legs. Detective Fuller was waiting in an unmarked car half a block away. She climbed in. Tell me you got that. Fuller's grin was savage. Every word, clean, clear, and completely incriminating. Grace, we've got him. We've got all of them. For the first time in months, Grace let herself feel it. Not hope, certainty. Justice was coming. The arrest happened at dawn. Grace watched from Detective Fuller's car as police descended on 3 addresses simultaneously. Marcus's waterfront mansion, Brett Donovan's Brickell condo, Daniel Cross's penthouse in Coral Gables. Fuller had wanted to wait until after they'd secured warrants, contacted the DA, built an airtight case. But Grace had insisted on being there for the arrests. She needed to see it, needed to witness the moment Marcus's world collapsed. They took Marcus first. He came out in pajamas, his face confused, then angry as officers cuffed him. Vanessa stood in the doorway in a silk robe, her perfect composure finally cracking. Camera phones appeared in neighbors' windows. By breakfast, the video would be everywhere. Brett tried to run, made it to his car before officers tackled him in the parking garage. The footage was spectacular, but it was Daniel's arrest that Grace wanted most. She had asked Fuller to save him for last. After Marcus and Brett were already in custody, she wanted Daniel to know he'd failed. They knocked on his door at 6:15 in the morning. Daniel answered fully dressed, as if he'd been expecting them. His eyes found Grace immediately, standing beside Fuller on the doorway. Clever, Daniel said. The wire at the coffee shop. Daniel Cross, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, witness tampering, obstruction of justice. an accessory to attempted assault. Fuller recited the charges while officers cuffed him. You have the right to remain silent. I'll be out by lunch, Daniel said calmly. My lawyers are the best money can buy. Your lawyers can't make your confession disappear, Grace said. Her voice was steady, cold. Every word you said is on tape. Every crime you admitted to. You thought you were untouchable. You were wrong. For the first time, Grace saw fear flicker across Daniel's face. You can't use a conversation I didn't know was being recorded. It's inadmissible. Actually, Fuller said cheerfully, Florida is a two-party consent state for private conversations. But we had a warrant. The DA signed it yesterday. Your conversation with Miss Hartley was legally recorded. Every word is admissible. You're done. Cross. They led him away. Grace watched until the police car disappeared around the corner. Then she allowed herself one deep, shaking breath. Beth appeared beside her. You did it. You actually did it. We did it, Grace corrected. I couldn't have found the evidence without you. The DA held a press conference that afternoon. Grace stood behind him, along with Detective Fuller and a dozen other officials. The DA explained the conspiracy, the arrests, the charge, and his tone was grim. This case represents a stunning abuse of power and wealth. 3 men conspired to destroy an innocent woman's life, to obstruct justice, and to profit from their crimes. Thanks to the courage of Grace Hartley and the diligent work of Detective Fuller and journalist Beth Morrison, these men will face the full consequences of their actions. Reporters shouted questions. Grace answered a few, keeping her responses simple and direct. Yes, she had worn a wire. Yes, she had been terrified. Yes, justice felt like oxygen after months of suffocating. The footage went viral instantly. Hashtag Justice for Grace trended worldwide. Marcus's company stock went into freefall. Board members called emergency meetings. Investors fled. But Grace didn't care about any of that. She cared about the arraignment the next morning. Judge Helen Garrett presided. She was in her 50s, with iron gray hair and a reputation for having zero tolerance for wealthy defendants who thought they could buy their way out of consequences. Marcus, Daniel, and Brett stood before her in orange jumpsuits. Their expensive lawyers argued for bail, house arrest, anything to keep their clients out of jail pending trial. Judge Garrett listened patiently. Then she delivered her ruling. I've reviewed the evidence in this case. The recording of Mr. Cross's confession is particularly illuminating. Bail is denied for all 3 defendants. They will remain in custody until trial. Marcus's face went white. Your Honor, I have a business to run. I'm not a flight risk. Mr. Hartley, you conspired with your business partners to destroy your wife's life, tamper with witnesses, and obstruct justice. You are precisely a flight risk. Bail denied. The gavel struck. Grace felt something in her chest unclench. They would sit in jail for months, waiting for trial. No more freedom. No more power. Just consequences. Outside the courthouse, Vanessa tried to approach her. Grace, please. I didn't know about any of this. Marcus lied to me too. Grace looked at the woman who had helped destroy her marriage, who had stood beside Marcus while he built his web of lies. You knew enough, Grace said quietly. And you chose him anyway. She walked away. Beth drove her back to her parents' house. Thomas was sitting on the porch, his recovery progressing well. He stood when he saw Grace, opening his arms. She collapsed into his embrace, finally allowing herself to cry. Not tears of grief, tears of relief, of rage released, of survival. That's my girl, Thomas whispered. That's my strong girl. That night, Grace slept dreamlessly for the first time since the yacht. No falling, no sharks, no Marcus. Just peace. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Grace testified for 3 days, walking the jury through every detail. The argument on the yacht, the push, losing Oliver, the months of manipulation and lies. The moment she discovered Daniel's betrayal, she didn't cry on the stand, didn't perform grief. She simply told the truth in clear, calm sentences. Let the facts speak for themselves. The prosecution presented Daniel's recorded confession, played it for the jury 3 times, his voice, cold and casual, admitting to destroying Grace's life for profit, describing Oliver's death as acceptable collateral damage. Two jurors cried during the playback. Even the defense attorneys looked uncomfortable. Brett Donovan cut a deal, agreeing to testify against Marcus and Daniel in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony was devastating. He described the conspiracy in clinical detail, the payments to witnesses, the deleted videos, the fake medical records, the manufactured audio evidence. It was Daniel's plan from the start, Brett said on the stand. Marcus wanted Grace gone, but he didn't know how to do it cleanly. Daniel designed the whole operation. I just handled the technical execution. Marcus's defense tried to paint him as a victim of Daniel's manipulation, but the emails told a different story. Marcus had been an active participant, enthusiastic even. He'd suggested using Vanessa as a distraction. He'd approved every payment, every lie. The jury deliberated for 7 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Marcus Hartley, guilty on all counts. 8 years in federal prison. No possibility of early release. Daniel Cross guilty on all counts. 10 years. His sophisticated role in the conspiracy earned him the harshest sentence. Brett Donovan. 5 years as part of his plea agreement. Grace sat in the courtroom as Judge Garrett delivered the sentences. Marcus stared straight ahead, his face carved from stone. Daniel looked at Grace once, his expression unreadable. Then they were led away in handcuffs. The civil trial came 2 months later. Faster, cleaner. Grace's attorneys sued for everything. Emotional distress, loss of business, medical expenses, punitive damages for the conspiracy. The jury awarded her $45 million. Every asset Marcus had, including his share of the company. Every investment Daniel had made with his illegal profits. Everything. Grace didn't celebrate the money. Money couldn't bring back Oliver, but it could build something in his memory. 1 year after the yacht incident, Grace stood at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. The building behind her was glass and steel, modern and beautiful. Her design, built from her settlement money. The sign above the entrance read, "The Oliver Brennan Center for Domestic Violence Survivors." Inside were safe apartments for women fleeing abuse, legal services, therapy, job training, everything Grace wished had existed when she'd needed it. Her parents stood beside her. Thomas healthy now, Claire beaming with pride. Beth had been promoted to investigative editor, her coverage of the case-winning journalism awards. She stood into the front row, camera ready. "My son didn't get to live," Grace said to the assembled crowd, "but his memory will save lives. This center exists because of him, because of what we survived, and because too many women faced the same battles I did, alone and afraid." She cut the ribbon. Applause echoed. Grace smiled, genuine and warm. She had rebuilt her architectural firm, taking on only projects she believed in. She was single, by choice, learning to love herself again before trusting anyone else. Some nights, she still dreamed of falling, of dark water and blood. But most nights now, she dreamed of Oliver. Not the loss, but the love. The brief time she'd carried him, feeling his kicks, imagining his future. She had given him that future, not the one they'd planned, but something real and lasting. A reporter approached. "Mrs. Hartley, Miss Brennan." Well, Grace had reclaimed her maiden name. "How does it feel? Justice moving forward?" Grace considered the question. "Justice doesn't fix what was broken. My son is still gone. That pain will never leave. But justice means my pain wasn't meaningless. It means Marcus and Daniel can't hurt anyone else. It means other women will see this story and know they can fight back. That's worth something." That evening, Grace visited Oliver's grave, a small plot in a quiet cemetery, marked with a stone that read, "Oliver Thomas Brennan, forever loved, forever missed, his mother's strength." She placed fresh flowers, white roses, and sat in the grass beside him. "I did it, baby," she whispered. "They're in prison. The center opened. Dad's healthy. We're okay." She paused. "I'm okay. Finally." The sun set over Miami, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Grace sat with her son until darkness fell, then walked back to her room. She had dinner with her parents tonight. Plans to review architectural proposals tomorrow. A life, imperfect and scarred, but hers. She had been pushed into dark waters and nearly drowned, had lost everything she thought defined her, but she had learned to breathe underwater. had found strength in depths she didn't know existed. Marcus had wanted to destroy her. Instead, he'd revealed what she was truly made of. Not glass that shattered, but steel that bent and flexed and refused to break. As Grace drove home through Miami's glittering streets, she thought about the women who would come to Oliver's center tomorrow. The scared ones, the broken ones, the ones who thought they had no options left. She would tell them what her father had taught her, what Oliver's memory had proven, what Marcus and Daniel had learned too late. You can't drown someone who's learned to swim in darkness. You can only teach them how strong they truly are. And Grace Brennan was strong, finally, fully, undeniably strong. She pulled into her apartment complex, grabbed her bag, and walked inside. Tomorrow she would help another woman find her strength. But tonight she would simply rest, because she had earned it, because she had survived, because justice, however imperfect, had been served. The end of the story wasn't revenge. It was rebuilding. Not a perfect life, but a real one. One where Oliver's memory lived on in the women his center would save, where Grace's pain transformed into purpose, where the darkness that tried to swallow her became the forge that remade her into something unbreakable. Marcus served his 8 years. Daniel served his 10. Brett Donovan was released after 3 and disappeared from public life. Vanessa's career never recovered. But Grace thrived. The Brennan Center helped over 2,000 women in its first 5 years. Grace's architectural firm was named one of the top 10 in Florida. She never remarried, though she dated occasionally. She learned that happiness didn't require a partner. Just purpose, just peace, just the strength to keep swimming, no matter how dark the water. And on quiet nights, when the grief threatened to overwhelm her again, Grace would place her hand on her heart and whisper to Oliver, "I'm still here, baby. Still fighting, still making your life matter. Still loving you with everything I am." That love, unbreakable and eternal, was the real victory. Not the money, not the convictions, but the proof that Marcus and Daniel had been wrong about everything. They thought they could push her under. Instead, they taught her to rise.